Okay, so there's all these rumors going around about, is it real? Is it fake? Is Trump making it up? Was this some kind of a uh, was this some kind of a deep state attack? Was this something else? It has no hallmarks of a deep state attack. It has no hallmarks of uh, anything else. It makes no sense for this to be any kind of a fake. So I spent years and years and years testing ballistic materials, and one second, I got people sending me information. Um, I spent a long time testing out ballistic materials. I spent probably 10 years in and out of different government facilities to do that. In order for that shot to have been faked, in order for them to have just gone and said, hey, let's graze the President Trump, let's just get it to go right. Nobody can make that shot. It's impossible. That's John Wick couldn't make that shot. For the other people saying, oh, it's a deep state attack, I got news for you. I know some people who were legit government snipers, who were legit, military, special forces, army, uh, Marine, you name it, instructors. And there is absolutely nobody that is going to take that shot and say, "Oh, I'm going to do this just for a show." It's too outrageous to even consider. So the people out there trying to say, "Oh, it's fake, it's made up, it's staged," I don't know where they get this. I really don't. At that distance, with somebody kind of just breathing and moving around and everything else, it's not a hard shot to make. I mean, at that distance, it's a super easy shot. I got it. My 14-year-old can make that shot. How this person missed, I don't know. And I'm not saying I'm glad he, I'm not saying that he should have aimed better. What I'm saying is that wasn't a trained person taking that shot. That was somebody who decided that they were just going to give this a try. It doesn't make any sense for any of that to be true. And sometimes you just kind of have to look at it like Occam's razor. What's the sort of least, what's the most probable thing? What's the least probable thing? And for people to say, oh, I've seen this one all over Twitter. Oh, all he did was duck down and take a razor blade and go like that. No, he didn't. Come on, there's like 28 cameras pointed at him all the time. There's no way he gets away with that. The people saying, "Oh, the sniper just got up on the rooftop and decided to graze him." I was a fantastic shot when I was in the Army. After I got out of the Army, like I said, I was testing ballistic materials for years. Nobody has that good shot placement. Nobody. The ability of someone to do that at that range would be phenomenal. For the people saying, "Oh, it's faked," because of whatever. Okay, well, what about the person who was an innocent bystander who's now dead? Right? I mean, how do you explain that one if it's faked and somebody using a BB gun? The one thing we can say from all this is that the Secret Service response was ridiculously weak. It should have never been as minimum as it was. If you were lucky, hang on one second. Somebody sent me new information. Yeah, nobody can perform such a feat. Exactly, nobody. It baffles my mind that people would even kind of come up with that. Somebody saying, "Oh, they staged it to distract from what's going on in Palestine." No, they didn't. How the hell do you come up with this shit? Now but the one that really gets me is people say it was he was just trying to graze him. That's impossible. There's just zero chance of that. Exactly. It's not like we don't have any history of failed assassination attempts. Um, and anybody who was a well trained marksman would know that you don't go for a headshot at that distance. You go center mass. Trump's not a small guy, right? He's really not. I know he says he's 6'5" or whatever, 220. He's clearly much bigger than that, at least weight wise. Now, height wise, I don't know. But I'm 6'4", and I know what I weigh, and I know what Trump claims. He's physically bigger than I am, and he's claiming numbers that are much different than my numbers, right? So, he ain't hard to miss. He ain't hard to hit. So whoever did this was an untrained idiot who wanted to go for a spectacularized headshot because that's what you see in movies and video games. It just absolutely positively failed. Using apparently an AR platform, which again, anybody who's really reasonably well trained, that's not their favorite platform by any stretch of the imagination. I've used them, I've owned them. I had one for a short time personally because I was using it to test some ballistic glass that I was designing for the Army. So if you're just joining or if you don't know anything about me, I do have a channel here on YouTube and presence on Twitter. And yes, I'm a chief technology officer now. My PhD's in physics, but I'm also a former Army. I have multiple patents in ballistic materials, including ballistic glass, including opaque armor. Some of the stuff I worked on was sent to Iraq and Afghanistan to keep people safe, including some stuff up against the EFP, the explosively formed penetrator, which is really hard to stop. But when you run those ballistic tests, you use bolted down rifles at very minimal distances. And even with a bolted down rifle trying to come in and hit something, what it would take to graze somebody is just the next thing to impossible. And that's in a controlled environment at a short distance, no crosswind. I'm not breathing. The target's not breathing. Everybody's sitting still. The gun's hard mounted on something. There is absolutely no way that somebody walked into that and saying, I'm going to graze somebody. It's impossible to consider. It just doesn't make any sense. I've got a Marine sending me emails now. So I've got somebody who's a former Marine guard I'm trying to convince to come on, who worked in embassies all over the world, including Moscow. So to me, the people out there claiming this is fake are trying to distract from what's going on. Now, the thing that really bothers me about this entire thing, truly bothers me about this, is we're going into a presidential election year that is the most divisive one in my memory. Maybe back when we had the Civil War when Lincoln was running, maybe it was worse. But this one is the most divisive one out there. This isn't going to help, right? This is only going to drive people further apart. And it's already doing it. It took 8 minutes on Twitter and some of the other social platforms before people started saying, oh, it's fake, it's a deep state, it's a cover-up, it's the CIA, it's the FBI. The news for you, CIA and FBI wouldn't have missed. The only thing I saw that was actually kind of held some water was somebody saying, oh, well, we know it wasn't the Clintons because they wouldn't have missed. Well, okay, that was number one. That was kind of funny. But number two, they're exactly right. Professionals don't miss. And I'm not saying the Clintons are responsible for suicides, but there's a lot of weird stuff with the Clintons. But the point is, how did people come up with this? It was fake stuff. I don't get. I don't understand exactly why people do this kind of shit. What makes them think that somebody would have the gall to do that? You've got Trump, who by himself is sort of a walking. I don't understand how he's one of our candidates. I don't understand the same thing about Biden. So don't get me wrong, but it makes no sense to me that when you have somebody like Trump, who is an egomaniac beyond belief, I think we can all agree with that. He is an absolute egomaniac. Not even he is weird enough to say, hey, please come take a shot at me, but let's, only graze me, right? There's no way in hell it's going to happen. Marine infantrymen agreed. You've seen some fantastic shooting, but nothing. Nobody does that, right? I mean, the guy had to be an idiot to have missed, right? I mean, people in boot camp could have made this shot. Me coming out of boot camp as an E3, I was pulling 39 out of 40, right? And that's out to 300 yards. This is like 300 and something feet, they're saying. The one thing that I think is overwhelmingly true is a number of years ago, the Secret Service was moved from under the Department of Treasury to the Department of Homeland Security. And as I understand it, a lot of the details of what it took to become a Secret Service agent were changed. A lot of them were reduced in sort of the needs. So a lot of the requirements were reduced. And as a result, you wind up with the Secret Service is not what it was under Reagan. Okay. So Great Omens, you're exactly right. Some extreme luck, moved at just the right moment. But who takes a headshot at that distance? You go center mass or you don't go. At that distance with a moving target, you're not going to go for the smallest thing. You're going to go for something much bigger. And then when he hits the ground, because he's not surrounded by Secret Service agents, if you have that clear of a line of sight, you go center mass, he's on the ground, then you take your headshot. You don't go headshot first. And you don't miss. I heard he pulled the trigger 8 times. You don't miss 8 times in a row, right? You just don't. And the Secret Service response where they sort of surrounded him with some people and they kind of let him keep popping out the top and pumping his fist like that. That was weak. It was just flat out weak. The guy, I mean, the Secret Service response you want, whether you like Trump or not, like forget that part for a second, whether it's Trump or Biden or whoever, RFK, who's running for president. If a shot gets taken at him, the Secret Service response should be his feet might touch the ground in between the podium and the vehicle, but they might not, right? They should pick his ass up, throw his ass in the vehicle and be gone. Because if you're the human meat shield, do you really want to stand there? No, you don't want to stand there. You want to just get the hell out of the place, right? So 200 meters, 3 shots, all missed except for an ear graze. And honestly, what I saw, I looked very carefully, and I'll see if I can find the image. So, I tested this stuff for years and years and years. And what it looked like on the image was that I don't think it was a bullet that grazed him. I really don't. I think it was it might have been return fire, but it was some number of shots were taken, right? So whether it was 3 or 8 or whatever, but the shooter got off more than one and missed with all of them. But the point is that if you look at the up close pictures of Trump after he was shot, and I am looking one up as I talk here, so forgive me if I'm not as coherent as I normally am, because number one, I'm tired. Number two, it takes a while to find these things. Anyway, so I can't find it quickly. But if you look at the picture of Trump, he's got sort of 2 graze marks on his cheek, and then there's the one back by his ear. There is no way that's a bullet mark, first off, because the 2 marks on his cheek, it would have left 1, not 2, right? And then you got the thing in his ear. So what I'm hearing is the same thing I kind of thought initially, was that it would be glass from the teleprompter, because it looked like the teleprompter was in between the shooter and the in between the shooter and the former president. So it looks like here it is. I found the picture. Now I can share it. It looks a lot like in wrestling it's called getting caught. Yeah, it's not. This was not wrestling. But let's find the picture here. Here is the picture. So if you see right here, he's got a couple of marks here, and it goes around his cheek, right? It kind of bends around a little bit. This one kind of does the same thing. Maybe that happened as he fell. Maybe this one happened as he fell. But for a second here, hear me out, and let's just go with, this was part of the initial accident, because when I watched the video, I didn't see him hit himself as he goes down, right? Probably debris from the teleprompter, because I think the teleprompter got hit first, caused this, and probably clunked up there. if this were a bullet wound, if you look, it doesn't really look like there's a penetration there. If this were a bullet wound, there would be a lot more blood. There's a little bit of blood here. There's not a ton. If it were, I've actually seen bullet wounds. They're not this. They're a lot messier than this, right? They're not that pretty. There's absolutely no way this was, in my opinion, this was a bullet wound. They're saying it was flying debris from the teleprompter, and that seems to hold, because when I would test, and I spent years and years and years, and if you look at my website, which is just myname.com, you'll see a list of patents. A whole bunch of them are on ballistic glass, so it's the stuff, the glass that stops bullets, right? So when you work in those labs, you see a lot of glass injuries, because there's debris everywhere. The stuff goes all over the place. And I've seen a lot of people get kind of caught up with glass shards. This to me looks all like glass injuries, which would have been coming out of the teleprompter, which I understand are polycarbonate glass, same difference. But to me, I don't see any of that as a graze. The teleprompter on one side was not broken. I haven't seen it on the other side. Okay. I could be wrong about it being the teleprompter, but, that's not a bullet wound. The debris came from somewhere, whether it was from the teleprompter or some other place, but I've seen a couple of legit news agencies saying it was the teleprompter. So I haven't seen a picture before or after the top. I have seen them before. I've seen some where they were setting up for the event, but I haven't seen any after. But that to me does not look like a bullet wound. That does not look like a bullet graze, because that is shockingly shallow. Nobody is that precise with a rifle. Nobody. I don't care if you are the best sniper on the face of the earth. Nobody's that good. The perspective could be a bit skewed by the camera lens, but if you look where it started on his face and where it ended up, it went around a curve, right? So let me pull that back up. Share screen, window. Yes, I'm a one-man operation. I don't have a crew. So if you look at this, this is rounded, right? This is rounded. This kind of goes around his face. He's got that looks like something from kind of maybe where he fell, but this to me looks like glass, and then it hit his ear, right? So to me, this does not look at all like anything that would have come from a bullet. That's not a graze, right? Because if that were a graze, this would be completely detached. This wouldn't be attached anymore. This was a light penetration wound. This was something else. That is not a bullet by any stretch of the imagination. I don't think he was shot in the head. I think he was hit with debris. Nobody can make that shot. Nobody can make that shot from 20 feet. Nobody's going to, especially hundreds of feet. Nobody's going to try it. And I got news for you. I have fired a lot of AR platforms over the years. The AR platform itself is not that accurate. So, yeah, the blood on the Secret Service man's jacket. Yeah. So yeah, there was actually a bystander that was hit and killed, and another one or two that were in critical condition that were carried off someplace. But yeah, to me, this just sort of reeks of, now we want to politicize, right? So, it's hard to take a closer look, but you've seen a bullet wound, right? Great old ones. If you've seen a bullet, does that look at all like a bullet wound? It's kind of hard to see, but there's not nearly enough blood there for that to have been a bullet wound. Yeah. And an AR, man, I had one for 6-7 months at one point, sold it. It was a piece of shit. It was one of the worst rifles I've ever owned. And it wasn't really good for testing. I mean, I had one because we had to use them in the lab to test, and it was easier for me to go buy it than it was for the university I was working at the time to go and purchase one because there's too much paperwork, and plus, I'll buy one anyway just because they're kind of fun. But I shot the AR, and I fucking hated the thing. It was Olympic Arms. It was a nice one. Terrible platform. Even with a scope, I would not recommend that platform to anybody. And the 223, if you use it for hunting, it's a wimp ass round. Anyway, my particular favorite, if you look at different platforms, is I've got a bunch of World War II stuff that's much nicer. But it exactly looks like a varmint rifle with rat shot. It may be shotgun blast or something, but at that distance is not shotgun, right? So it had to be debris. Could not possibly have been a bullet wound, not at that distance. There's nothing that grazes you at that distance. Nobody gets that lucky. right? It just doesn't. So to me, all the stuff you see running around all the different platforms about, oh, it was a setup, or it was a graze, it was a fake, the Trump campaign set it up. It's not the case. Come on, people. Now the Secret Service returned fire quickly, and some of those pictures are starting to run too. I actually have an M1 Garand, and it is possibly the nicest platform I own. Almost as accurate as the Mosin Nagant, which is bolt action instead of semi-automatic if you get out to much longer ranges. But the Mosin Nagant's also a little bit longer barrel, so it has a few advantages over it. But the M1 Garand is an amazing, amazing rifle. I've got one that's just about the right thing. And the Secret Service, they returned fire with what looked like a Barrett. And the Barrett in that size comes in two versions. It's a 30 caliber or a 50 cal. I don't know which one they were using, because technically it's against the Geneva Convention to use a 50 cal against a human target. But I would bet it was the 30 caliber. But the Secret Service is with a Barrett, you don't miss. And there's pictures running around of the alleged shooter. And if you look at that, that's an obvious bullet wound, and there's blood everywhere. But it just this to me holds no freaking water. I don't understand how people are out there saying it's a fake. I don't understand how people can justify sitting around and going, "Oh, Trump planned it. Trump did this. He fell down and cut himself with, in wrestling." He's an asshole, but not that big an asshole, right? I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me. Yeah, I get that the world doesn't care about the Geneva Convention right now, Jen, but the Secret Service would, because they're part of the government, and the government supplies those weapons, and the government has all these administrators running around, and the administrators would probably check. So I would bet you it's a 30 cal that they had up there. But yeah, M14 is a better rifle, in my opinion, than the AR platforms. But the USMC competition guys, being ex-Army, well, the Marine Corps are nice guys, but we all know they eat crayons for snacks. I'm kidding. I have some great friends that are Marines, and I hope they don't come hurt me tomorrow. But I cannot get my head wrapped around this being a fake. I cannot get this. And the other part is, if you look at some of the things that are showing up, and I've got a bunch of them showing up in my box right now. Patron, that's funny. No, I actually understand exactly people these days. So one of the little known things that people don't understand is when you actually are a real scientist. And my PhD is in physics, and I spent 12 years at MIT. I was in the defense and aerospace sector for a while. Now the chief technology officer or something. And what happens more often than not is when you're out places and people find out a little bit about your background, I wind up with a lot of people trying to prove they're smarter than I am for some reason. And there are many subjects in which many people are much smarter than I am. I am not the smartest guy on the planet, but the subjects I know, physics, ballistics, mechanics, all those things, I know really well. So what I find hilarious is people want to prove they're smarter than the scientist at scientific stuff. And I'm like, I'm sure you're a great salesman, but when it comes to physics, please, I went to school for a long time for this. I've worked in it for 30 years. I believe I actually understand the stuff pretty well. And I have people come at me going, "Oh, you don't get it. I saw on Twitter." I'm like, okay, really? I'm on Twitter. I understand. You've seen it, but it doesn't make it right. But so, yeah, I'm not forgetting how stupid the general population is. However, we are in an election year. That in an election year, people just want their side to win. That's all they care about. We don't care about policies. We don't care about issues. All we care about is defeating the other guy. And this election year is the most divisive I have ever seen. And I'm 52 years old. What bothers me more than anything else about this election year is most people I talk to cannot tell you a single issue that they're voting for. All they can tell me is who they're voting against and why I need to vote their way. Now, my personal opinion is this year we've backed ourselves into a corner where we have this sort of national paleontology project going on with two guys that really shouldn't be running for this office for different reasons. we should have two completely different candidates. And it drove me absolutely insane when I started asking around of people I know, not online, offline, of, hey, what issue are you looking forward to seeing discussed the most? And it was, nobody had an issue. It was always just, I'm for this guy or against that guy. Mostly it's against somebody. This is it worse than 2020? Isn't it kind of the same thing? Even Weird Al was like, had a video called Deja Vu show up. It's like, haven't we seen this story before? And it didn't get better with age. It's like the Dallas Cowboys. We're bringing back a running back who didn't get better with age. But the point is, as we go into these elections, we go in more divided than ever. And the only time in my adult life that I've actually voted for someone was the Perot election, which was the first time I was allowed to vote. But the one I think that's going to solidify this election or change this election, however which way you want to look at it, is there's really three states. There's three states that really make a difference. There's Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Florida. Those are the three, right? If you don't carry those, you really don't carry the electoral college. And when I watched the debate last time, I watched former President Donald Trump and current President Joe Biden argue women's rights for about 5 minutes. And then I did some looking up of a few things, and forget which side of the debate you fall down on. Both of those guys were either in their late 20s or early 30s, depending on which one you're talking about, before women were allowed to have a credit card. And here are these two guys up there arguing about women's rights. They were both in their mid to late 20s before women were allowed to sign a lease without their husband or their father. How the hell are these guys the right ones for the job, right? When we're trying to decide things with women's reproductive rights, whatever end of that you come down on, and I know which end I come down on, but I have moral reasons for my position. But a whole different world for an individual, and it's not my world to try to dictate things to somebody. But these two guys are both in an age bracket where they should not be in a position that is that high stress. They should not be in a position where they're the ones that get to decide whether or not we launch military invasions or launch nukes or things of that nature. Now, to me, we have upper limits on age for things like pilots. We have upper limits on age for things like military members. We have upper age limits for all kinds of jobs. We don't have one for presidents. And I didn't truly believe this until I went and looked it up myself again. There's never been a Gen X president. Never. Barack Obama was the closest we had, and he was the tail end of the boomers. All right. He probably spoke Gen X more than anything, but we've got two guys who are absolutely in an age bracket where we have to wonder, do they understand what's really going on? Do they really get the problems that everyday Americans actually face? And I don't think they do. Joe Biden's been in office for so long that I think he's disconnected from the general population. I think he's disconnected from the challenges you and I kind of face on a regular basis. Trump, I don't think has ever been connected to the challenges that you and I would face on a regular basis. So I think both these guys are out there. I know people don't want a Gen X because I'm solid Gen X, right? I was born in 72. I'm kind of right in the middle of it. And it gets to the point where now that I've kind of been single for a couple of years and I got divorced a couple of years ago, been single for a couple of years and I'm kind of out, doing things more than I used to. I didn't realize just how fucked up the rest of the world is because I've been kind of at home with the wife and kids. And now that the kids are only here half time and they're teenagers and they don't really want me around as much anymore because I'm not cool enough. I'm kind of out doing some things on my, sort of in the singles world. And I didn't realize just how fucked up it was. And it just bring this back to politics for a second. I've actually had people when I was out places and I've seen it on dating websites where people are, will put clearly at the top, if you vote this way, don't contact me. Like, do we really have a litmus test for that? We really are now to the point where we will say, here's the people I'm going to spend time with and the people I don't, which means politically speaking, we have echo chambers. We're at a point, and I hope, John, I hope you and Gen X or whoever else agrees with me on this. There was a time in this country where we could sit down at a table with people who had different political backgrounds from us. We could talk about issues, and we could say, hey, look, let's go ahead and work this out. Let's discuss it. Let's figure out where you sit, figure out where I sit, and let's kind of figure out a happy road in the middle and how we can kind of go forward and solve this problem. We can't do that anymore. You can't even be in the same room with somebody from the other political party for fear you'd be called names. And that, to me, says more about this country than anything else, because we need to get back to a point where we actually can have those conversations. And if we can't have those conversations, we're not going to solve shit. Right, we got two major political parties that don't give us a say, and only snipers isn't doing well at all. You're right, and yes, they posted a pic. The New York Times website did post a picture of an aerial view of the shooter and sniper positions. My 14-year-old could have made that shot, right? The Secret Service had the guy down in seconds. So yeah, the thing that gets me is by tomorrow afternoon, if I were the president, I'd be firing the head of the Secret Service because they messed this one up. Right, I've been out of the Army since 1996. I could call some friends of mine, and we could have a better security detail put together this after, like before midnight, right, and could have solved this problem. But yeah, I don't get where we've gotten to as a country if shit like this is where we're at. Right, we disagree with somebody, so we got to go shoot him and shoot an innocent bystander in the way, and at the same time. And the other one that's driving me absolutely nuts is I've actually seen and reported some of them on a couple of the social media sites, because there's people mad because the guy missed. There's people legit sitting there going, somebody finally had the balls to do it and he missed. What's wrong with what is wrong with you? Right? What's wrong with the person recording that video saying, how dare you miss? Come on, really? And what about the innocent bystander that got killed? What about there's one or two people in critical condition, and what the fuck is going on with that, where everybody's happy about it, right? I don't sit left of the aisle. I don't sit right of the aisle. I kind of sit in the middle because I'm a scientist and I like logic and reason. But, to me, it's kind of like, why don't we have logic and reason in this country anymore? What happened to us as a nation that we've decided that logic and reason are secondary issues for somebody else to be concerned about? So, like, take this take this one, right? So I was out talking to somebody the other day, and some scientific subject came up, and I said, no, you're not quite looking at it right. It's really like this. And they said, really, where's your proof? I'm like, it's a scientific principle I learned as a fucking sophomore. What's my proof? 28 textbooks, right? But they wanted me to like Google it and show them the truth. I'm like, okay, let me explain something to you. As a PhD physicist, Google is not your best friend. Right? It's just not. Google may or may not have the right answer. And what I find interesting is now that AI is coming out and sort of becoming more real, there's people saying, well, look, AI doesn't always have the right answers. Like, really? But for 15 years, I've heard from people, I Googled what you just told me and Google disagrees. Well, gee, I don't know. Maybe my years in the labs at MIT might have taught me a thing or two, right? That Google may not know when you Google the wrong freaking phrase, right? So I don't understand. So, Rodney, you're exactly right. We've been driving the country to extremes, and I think I know what's caused it. And this is what I wanted to get to. What we've done in this country is we've, as the voting public, kind of let, well, I was getting glare on my glasses, so, I can see the screen, but reading the tinier words is a problem. And I'm not doing math, so it's okay. I don't really have to be that, that accurate without doing math. But one of the things that we've gotten to in this country, and we ran a simulation on it once when I was up in Massachusetts, is when it comes to organizing a presidential campaign, that's one thing. When it comes to organizing a Senate campaign, that's another. And when it comes to organizing a congressional campaign, that's a third. At one point in time, I was stupid enough to decide, hey, look, maybe I should go run for Congress. I was living in Massachusetts at the time, was running as a Republican because in Massachusetts, if you're a Republican, I live in Texas now, that would qualify me as a Democrat. So, what that means about me, I don't know, but it puts me in the kind of middle ground. Now, what I find funny about it is when I went to run, the sitting party chairperson up in that state looked at me and said, "Hey, we do the same thing the Democrats do with first-time candidates. We're going to sit down and have a conversation. We're going to talk." And I said, "Okay, great." So we sat down and talked, and the party chair looked at me and said, "You're not allowed to talk to our donors." I'm like, "They're Republican donors. How are they yours? Not, sort of just donors, right?" No, you can't talk to our donors. In your first election, you have to spend $1 million of your own money, and we're going to tell you what to say. And I'm like, okay. Well, I'm reasonably certain I'm smart enough to figure out what I want to say on different issues, and don't voters want to hear that? And the answer was no. You need to go out and say what we want you to. And it was all these really extreme positions, right? It was all these really bizarre extreme positions. And the reasoning for that was it would get people excited to come out and vote for the top of the ticket guys. And that way, maybe they can get somebody in the governor's office. Now, that's running for Congress, okay? That is the baby step version of weird ass shit you get at the federal level. So the two parties are trying to control who runs for Congress. Now, let's look at Congress one step further. Now, the other problem is when you run for Congress, what they've done is gerrymandered the districts. And the districts are almost impossible to poach, right? So if you got a gerrymandered district, it's really going to go Democrat or Republican. It's never going to switch parties. So the only way you can get a new person in office is if somebody dies, they decide to retire, and then usually that person will have kind of handpicked their replacement, or you primary challenge them for a more extreme position of your own party. I saw it happen in Massachusetts a couple times. A sitting Democrat would be taken out by another one who just went more liberal. I've seen it happen here in Texas, where a sitting Republican will be taken up by another one because they go more conservative. Now, how's that good for the country, right? Because all you're doing is kind of shoving things to the extremes. And over 40 years, what we've done is gone boom, far extreme, right? So think about like 1985 to today, right? You've gone from sort of, we can kind of get along to, nope, can't be in the same room. Now, Senate, you're not going to be able to run for Senate, and you're not going to get on a primary in the Senate unless the state party chair handpicks you. So a very small number of people actually have a real shot at running for Senate. Okay. So party insiders select who you and I get to vote for. That's what that means, both the Senate and Congress. So if you and I don't really get a say, even in the primary process, because they're kind of handpicking who they want, what does that say about us, even as a representative republic, right? So what does that say about us as a sort of a representative sort of a democracy, right? So once you get up to the president level, we get to pick between two people that a very small number of people have selected for us to choose between. And those people up at the very top are just trying to keep control, and that control is amongst the people that they feel are going to do the things that they want. So, I look at this and just say, guys, what are we doing here? Not only have we allowed ourselves to become sort of divided as a country, we're taking pot shots at presidential candidates. We're calling them fake, which they're clearly not fake, right? It's clearly a real shot. Nobody in their right mind pulls that shot off without as a fake. To me, we've just kind of ridden it completely off the rails as a country. We need to get shit back on track. We need to get shit back to where we can actually have a civil dialogue without calling each other names. We got one presidential candidate who can't get through a day without calling people names. We got another presidential candidate who is clearly got age challenges. Now, I can pick on Trump for that too, because he's not that much younger, right? So at any minute, his health could turn on a dime and go the other direction. So we have got to get back to a point in this country where we can have a civil dialogue. Otherwise, we ain't moving the ball down the road at all. And I could tell you something else is coming down the pipeline that I don't think any of these guys have looked at. And remember, I work in artificial intelligence now. My PhD is in physics, but I've worked in AI for years. AI and automation, not just AI, but artificial intelligence and automation has gotten much cheaper in the last 4 years. That's why you're starting to see a lot of deployments on it that people can actually use. The stuff has existed in the lab for 20 years. I've been using it since 2003 in a variety of ways. I've written code in it since 2003. Some of it had to run on supercomputers because that was the only place you could put it at the time. But now we have this thing called cloud computing. And cloud computing has made it much less expensive so that you and I can experience it in our everyday lives. And along with that, the price of automation has come way, way, way down. And this is something one of the two presidential candidates going to have to actually look at is in the next 3 to 5 to 6 years, any economist who's actually looked at the AI stuff and looked at it carefully will say that 30 to 40 to 45% of the jobs on the planet are going to be replaced by some form of automation or AI. And there's people that are going to look at me and go, oh, yeah, we'll just be replaced with different jobs. Sure, some of them. But if you look at it, I can replace 20 jobs with one. What does that do for the other 19 people? We only need so many Uber drivers, right? We only need so many Lyft drivers or so many Uber Eats or Grubhub drivers. Where do those people go to find jobs? Now, that, yes, cloud computing is just a huge computer cluster, someone else's, but it's a whole lot cheaper than it was just 10 years ago. It even just 3 years ago, it's got a lot cheaper. And what that's going to do is it's going to put a lot of people out of work. And when you see when that kind of subject comes up, I've had sitting politicians, when I bring it up, tell me, oh, don't worry, we'll just create new jobs. Sure, some, but not nearly enough. And oh, we've had revolutions before. Sure, we've had technology revolutions that have replaced jobs before, but it took 10 to 12 to 15 to 20 to 25 years to do it. This is like by the end of the next presidential term. And nobody's really figured out what the hell we're actually going to do when you have that kind of disruption. And I don't see the question getting asked. Instead, what I see in debates are golf score discussions, right? We see, well, I've got a better handicap than you. Who cares, right? Who gives a shit about your handicap? Who gives a shit about his handicap? I don't give a crap, right? What I care about is how are you going to lead this country out of the divided pile of shit that we've become into a country that actually can sit in the same room and talk to each other. That's all I care about. How are we going to solve the economic problems that are coming down the pipeline? Because during COVID, we expanded the M2 money supply to the point of no return, and we had to double the interest rate, which made it so that your interest rate on a home goes from 3 to 7 or 8, 6, 7 or 8%, depending on your credit score. And we took auto loans percentages and sent them through the roof. That's just now starting to hit the economy. What the hell is that going to do? Those are not in the debate, right? Instead, we've got age, we've got felonies, now we're going to have gun control. We're not really looking at the problems we need to go solve. And this incident, as witnessed on Twitter, everything from fake to, deep state, is really a prime example of us being just too separated as a nation to, I think, function properly. And until we can kind of get back together and say, look, we can actually be united. Remember, after 9/11, the country was united for like 20 seconds and we all kind of got along. Didn't take long for that to change. But it did, right? But we were united for a little bit. Do you see us becoming, anybody who's listening, do you see us becoming united like that again without something huge like World War III or a nuke going off in Detroit or something? I mean, I don't see what it would take to do that. Anyway, it may have been glass. There was no way it was a bullet graze. It can't possibly have been a bullet graze. There's no way. Nobody. There's not nearly enough blood for it to have been a bullet graze. I can't see it. I tested enough stuff for enough years, Dale. I just can't possibly see that as a bullet graze. But anyway, the shot of the bullet going past his head, that actually looked very legitimate to me. I've seen a lot of pictures of bullets flying in the air, and at 30 frames a second, that looks about right. And it was probably a near miss. But anyway, people are just sort of too much. You're right. People are just kind of too much of a bully these days to really have us all unite. Hopefully it'll happen someday. Hopefully it'll happen in my lifetime, but who the hell knows? All right. Well, I think that's it for me for tonight. I'm going to bed. Maybe tomorrow we'll actually have some real details on this. I hope everybody has a great night. Thanks for stopping in.